Hi everyone, welcome to It's Not You, It's the Media. I'm joined by Suchitra and Madhuri, and we are introducing something very exciting on our podcast starting from today. We will frequently be inviting guests to come on our show to talk to us about various topics, and we could not be more lucky because we have been able to have Yousef Aljamal, a writer and editor and translator, who will be joining us today. And he recently published an extraordinary and beautiful collection of Refaat Alareer's works called If I Must Die, after the poem that went viral, that went global after Refaat Alareer was brutally assassinated by Israel. And If I Must Die brings together poetry and prose and quotations, and is also visually very beautiful. The cover is very gorgeous, and it has an introduction, a very personal, heartfelt introduction by Yousef Al Jamal, as well as one by Susan Abul Hawa, the writer and activist. So we will have Yusuf come and talk to us a little bit about the book. But while we wait for him to show up, I just wanted us to go around and talk a little bit about this legacy that inspires us, that teaches us, that keeps on giving us hope. The writings of Rafat Alareer, his poetry, his army of students and writers that he proliferated, that he taught, and that are carrying on his work. And I think just last week there was a horrible, absolutely brutal massacre in Gaza. The genocide has resumed at full speed. The ceasefire has ended. And one of the things that happened, of course, which was very interesting, was, as it tends to happen, one of Rafat's tweets from May 2021 shows up. And in that, Rafat says, ceasefire. What usually happens in occupied Palestine is that Palestinians seize and Israel fires. So we all know Rafat's Twitter account is something we all go back to again and again. And it's prophetic, it's brilliant, it's there are takedowns, there's humor, there's wit, all these kinds of things. But let me start with either of you. How did you first encounter Rafat Alareer, and what would you say about his legacy or impact on you?
Yeah, so I basically encountered Rafat Alareer. I want to say it was about 7 or 8 years, 8 years ago, maybe, when I read Gaza Writes Back. And it was also when I was really sort of getting on Twitter. And then, I started to follow Rafat on Twitter. When I was reading this beautiful book that Yusuf has assembled, he mentions that Rafat used to do book signings and often say um, Palestine is just a stone or a story away. Even when I read Gaza Writes Back, and when I read that, it reminded me of just how immensely powerful words can be, and the counter narrative, so to speak, is. And to me, that was what I really got from Rafat's work, his own writing, and then his work in making other people write. Because sure, Yusuf will talk about this, but he was all about the stories, the writing the counter to the mainstream media. Keep on telling your stories, because that's what the Zionist empire is. It's a story. So keep on and on and on telling your story. And maybe Yusuf will talk about why Rafat was so compelled to write in English. um, but for me personally, I was also just getting started off as a writer, and I felt very kind of insignificant, and like, why, how could I have anything that is meaningful to say? um, and that sort of was one of the that philosophy of, no, you just have to write your story, and you just have to create the counter narrative, was really what moved me, or gave me courage, right? And when he was targeted by Israel, it was blatantly obvious to me why. Because he is the type of person who can inspire imagination and hope. And to him, I think, he lived his life in the occupation, but a free Palestine existed in his imagination. And he made it exist in other people's imagination. He made liberation something that felt tangible, real, and just somebody who has the capacity to do that, of course, will be targeted by the state. And in all of this, and sometimes even when we have had these conversations, sort of existential conversations about our podcast, or at the work that we do in the media, individually and together, and what is this all for, and what is this all for, I find myself continuously returning to that philosophy, which is, it does not matter who listens. It will find this podcast, the work we do, the words we write, the stories we'll tell, will find the people they are supposed to. And simply the work of doing it, regardless of who it reaches, is meaningful and important. And that has originated for me. This conviction has originated in me with Rafat's work, and I will carry it on every single day, no matter who listens. I will come out here and I will do the work, and I owe that to Rafat.
For me, I think it's very hazy because I feel like he's been in public discourse for a really long time. I spent the summer of 2008 and 2009 in occupied Palestine. And soon after Operation Cast Lead, I was then living in Cairo, so I could go across into Gaza for the first time. And this was also the time that White Phosphorus was written. And once anyone spends, like, I think for many of us, there's there is the textual understanding of Palestine comes from Edward Said and others. At least for me, it is Edward Said. You really, Edward Said did loom so large in so many people's intellectual landscapes. So you always knew that Palestine existed, that Palestine would be free one day. But once you go to occupied Palestine and see what it is, I don't think anyone returns without a deep commitment for the Palestinian cause. And I think once you step into Gaza, even for me, when it was like it was a few hours, I think I could see what that destruction looked like. So a few years after 2009, I was by now living in New York. An email arrived saying that Refaat Alareer is going to be, this editor of this book is going to be on a book tour, and it's called Gaza Writes Back. As someone who had very briefly borne witness to what had happened in 2009 after Operation Cast Lead, it was like, okay, Gaza Writes Back um, it felt like I had to be there. I went, I saw him speak in NYU many years in New York, many years ago. My great regret is not walking up to him and speaking to him or building a friendship with him. It was just so incredibly powerful as a speaker. Over the years, of course, I rediscovered him a few years later in 2016, 17, I think, if I'm not mistaken, through Twitter. But really, I think I've taught his book. I feel close to his work as someone who's taught the book with my students. I've read this book now with my students for a couple of years. um I don't know, it just sometimes feels like he's still there and had these conversations. And for me, he is the kind of funny like figure of the modern day. His wit, unabashedly being Palestinian, not compromising or being kind to the New York Times, the New Yorker. He really did drive in to the American elite liberal publishing media. He knew them. He could see them with so much clarity. And then of course now his YouTube videos of him in his classes are now like a small cult classic. Um, and there's one thing I really like is the fact that how much he loved. It's very easy to be around people who don't like their students and complain about their students, but this man truly loved his students. And for me, it's sometimes hard to be so irreverent, so promising, so brilliant, so kind, and so generous. So I think now at this point in time, he doesn't feel real. He feels like it's kind of hard to believe that somebody like him existed.
I know, and the good die young, as they say, pithy and stupid as that sounds, but it was a life force taken away, right, from us, and for the reasons you said, Madhuri. I mean, the danger that that he presents for being able to free someone's imagination, to feed someone's imagination in the way that he did, is extraordinary. For me, it's sort of having always like majored in literature, written about literature, but always literature that's political, and always knowing at every step of the way of my studies, of my teaching career, just how much the world, the establishment, attempts to de-link literature from the political. So when you have someone like Refaat Alareer, who's constantly engaging with that very inextricable link between politics and literature, you're reminded again and again about the forces that try so hard to decouple culture from politics and things like that. So I think this is the legacy, at least for me, to carry on doing what I do, which is to understand the political power of literature and writing. And I actually see Yousef Aljamal has come into the studio. Yousef Aljamal is a writer, editor, and translator. He works as Gaza coordinator at the Palestine Activism Program at the American Friends Service Committee. He is a refugee from Al Nusayrat refugee camp in the Gaza Strip and was a student of the late Refaat Alareer, and traveled with him, and became very close to him, and has now put together this beautiful book, If I Must Die, which was published early this year by OR Books in New York. Welcome, Yusuf. Thank you for joining us on our podcast. We are so grateful to talk to you, and we have all poured over the copies of this beautiful volume that you have assembled and edited, If I Must Die, Poetry and Prose by Refaat Alareer, who was your teacher and then a close friend with whom you traveled and you did lots of projects together. And I just wanted to start by asking how it came about, whose idea was it, how was the process of putting it together?
So, as you know, when Rifat was assassinated in Gaza, there was a global outrage, and
Mhm.
many people were talking about Rifat and his writings and his impact and the impact he had on his students. Um, People were circulating his videos. So, a mutual friend suggested that I put Rifat's writings, or most of Rifat's writings, together in one book and publish them. So we started the conversation with our books, and a few months later, after an agreement was reached with Rifat's surviving family, his wife and children, um, they agreed to publish the book with our books, and we started working on the text and selecting, articles. So it include poetry, journal articles, chapters, and books, as well as quotes Rifat published in the past. So we put them together. I worked on them, and the book came out in November 2024, just before the first year anniversary of the assassination of Rifat. And the reaction, we'll talk more about this, was a huge, because Rifat meant a lot of things to a lot of people.
Was there some organizing principle? Like, what was one of the most important things you felt had to be in the book? One of the things I miss, but I don't know how it can be included, are Rafat's tweets, because this is just absolute fire. I mean, he's a brilliant, brilliant commentator and prophet on Twitter. And I miss that. But just a little bit about organizing and decisions around what should be included.
A book has a size, so you have to stop at
Yeah.
some point. I think if we work on 10 books, it's not enough to tell who Rifat was.
Yes.
Like, social media is another story in itself,
Sure.
especially Twitter. Rifat had two accounts. His first account was shut down. This is
Mhm.
Gaza. And then he went to create another X account, called I Translate 123.
Yeah.
As you said, he was very brilliant, but we couldn't, for organizational reasons, include everything in this book. I totally agree with you that his tweets were very witty,
Yeah.
sharp. That's Rafat. You know,
Yeah.
he's multi-talented. He's very smart. He knows how to play with language. It's his game. He knows when to say what. He knows how to use images and videos on social media. That's why he was popular. So a lot of
Hmm.
people liked his style. Even poetry. Sometimes I remember there was an Indian poet who was invited to the White House and she declined. I cannot remember her name now. And Rifat, she said she has a very special style of writing poetry, poems, where the shape of the poem itself has a
Mm.
meaning. So Rifat responded to her with another poem that took also
Oh, wow.
a specific shape. And people were like, Rifat, you are like enduring genocide in Gaza. How do you do this? And I mean, this is real. He always had his
I think the
sense of
poet
humor. And sometimes he would be really brutal with his jokes,
Hmm.
especially with his close friends.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
yeah. I think the poet you're referring to is Rupi Kaur.
Yes.
Ah, yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
That's funny.
Yusuf, congratulations on this book. And I'm so pleased with how well it's doing. Um, you know, it's so meaningful to have you here as someone who knew Rafat personally. And just as you were sharing this anecdote, I was thinking, if you could tell us what he was like and maybe share some memories that, the ways in which, some fond memories of him.
So I lived with Rifat for about 3 weeks in Malaysia, and as the plane was approaching Kuala Lumpur, he asked me if I had accommodation because that was my first time in Malaysia as a student. I just visited 2 months before, and I needed accommodation this time, and I said no, and he took me in his
Mm.
apartment. He supported me even financially. That's when I started breaking the ice with Rifat because in the past he was my teacher and I always like I was scared to even like call him Rifat without calling him Mr. Rifat or
Yeah.
Dr. Rifat. But I realized that Rifat, although he was a tough teacher, he was a fun guy
Hmm.
in many different ways. He always cracked jokes. Um, there was a roommate of Rifat, a flatmate, who was also killed during the genocide, an IT expert. And that guy was into details. But Rifat never cared too much about unimportant details. So he would always tell him, please do not do this and that. And then the guy would like do these things. For example, he would write down numbers, like two sophisticated numbers. Instead of writing 109, he would say 109.347. And then they had a bet that if any of them drives the other crazy, um, that the person who is driven crazy is going to pay the other guy an amount of money. And none of them won the bet because they were very stubborn. Um, I remember one time also when I stayed with him for about 3 weeks. Rifat lived a very humble life. If you, even I wanted to, I was in Malaysia last year. I wanted to visit his apartment, and I remember his room was very small, with all his stuff and books and clothes, and he was also working online at the same time to support his family. Um, and when I visited a friend after I left Rifat's house, she treated me for dinner and she was very generous and she made a very good dinner. She's from the Punjab originally, lived in Singapore and Malaysia for many years, also in the Arab world. So she knew how to make Italian, Arab, Mexican food. And she treated me to all types of dishes. And I said, "Oh, today I can say that I had dinner." And then Rifat read that. I posted that on social media, and he got mad at me. I said, "You stayed with me for 3 weeks. You didn't say thank you." So he forced me to come to his place on the weekend and to apologize. He said, "The only way I'll forgive you if you go down the stairs and buy a watermelon. So I went down the stairs. There was a Indian Malaysian guy selling watermelons, and I bought a watermelon and I took it upstairs, and he said, "Okay, now I can forgive you." So he was a fun guy. Like if you stay with Rifat, he's the man of jokes,
Yeah.
Hmm.
and he like he's a writer. Okay, so
Yeah.
when he's in the taxi in public transportation, he's walking around. He notices things that normal
Right.
people don't, and he
Yeah.
makes jokes and connections. Um,
Mm.
Yeah.
so that was the period I realized that Rifat was not just a tough teacher, because going back to school, he was really tough, like, and sometimes very mean with the grades. I almost
Really?
failed the first course I took with him, not
Wow.
Oh.
because I didn't work hard then, but then the second course I worked hard, and I got a very good grade. So if you work hard, he always told me that the number of students who get A's is higher than the number of students who fail his courses.
Mm.
uh, so even if you are a lazy student, I was a lazy student at the beginning, he makes you a hardworking student. He would encourage you.
Hmm.
He would tell you, okay, if you read a book, you will get one grade. You see, only one grade. But then you love the book, and he makes you read books
Yeah.
outside the curriculum.
But he didn't
Right.
joke around in the classroom?
No,
I
he
mean,
did, he did, but he still was
very
tough with the
strict.
grades. With like, you have to come on time, you have to do homework every day.
Yay.
So if you
Yeah.
take a course with Rifat, it feels like taking three courses with uh,
Love it.
like another teacher at the same
Beautiful.
time. Yeah.
That's
Hmm.
So
lovely.
the load. I remember in our translation class, he said, if you memorize 1,000 words, and you have to memorize 1,000 words from the dictionary that are not used in daily life, that are very sophisticated, like it improves your language, and then you have to use these 1,000 words uh, in two sentences each. So you end up with 2,000 sentences,
Hmm.
and you
What?
translate them into Arabic.
Oh my
Oh
God.
my God.
If you do all of this, you get 5 grades.
Okay.
So
Oh my God.
he thought that no one will do it. I did it. He
Okay.
told me I thought no one will do it,
I'm
and he did
glad.
it.
Wow.
Otherwise, what's the point of
But
having you on
it
our
took me like
program? Of
so
course
much
you did it.
time. Yeah, so it took me so much time to work on this. So
Of
this is how
course.
he he gets the best out of his students. It's not about, like, a book where you read it and then you pass. No, in
Mm.
Rifat's classes, you feel like he's global in his teachings.
Yeah.
Hmm.
I mean, that's no surprise that he was global in his death,
Right.
because he was global in his teachings. If you go to his classroom, you learn about everything.
Hmm.
You learn about his grandmother, you learn about his mom, you learn about storytelling, you learn about creative writing, you learn about politics, you learn about philosophy, you learn about Orientalism, you learn about settler colonialism, you learn
Hmm.
about Malcolm X, Amilcar Cabral,
Yeah.
and the list goes on. Ghassan
Yeah.
Kanafani, Edward Said. So he was very visionary. He didn't like this
Mhm.
word, by the way.
The
Why?
Because
visionary? He didn't like the word visionary?
yeah, because someone he Rifat thought wasn't visionary, was called visionary. So he said he murdered the word. Uh, so he joked about visionary always
Yeah.
because of that guy. Wasn't visionary. Yeah.
Very.
I first saw Refaat almost a decade ago when, after Gaza Writes Back was published, he did a tour of
Yes.
the US. I didn't know who he was, and seeing him speak about the book was one of the most powerful experiences of my life, because I had really.
Where was that?
This was in New York. This was in New York. I
Okay,
think it was either going to Chicago to do. He was on a book tour in the US, so
I
um,
was with him.
yeah. So maybe you were
Yeah,
at the event.
with Rawan Yaghi. Yeah, we were in the same talk. Yeah.
So for me, it was an incredibly powerful moment. And over the years, I've taught Gaza Writes Back. And it's an incredible book. The moment students read the book, something in them changes. You can see something change in their eyes. Tell us about, one, how Refat put this book together. You are in the book. So, one, the book, putting of the book together itself, but why is this book such a radicalizing, enduring force, do you think?
I think you're referring to the talk at NYU. Um, yeah, and I think there is a recording. of the talk that the three of us gave. So Rifat's daughter was assassinated in April 2024, a few months after Rifat was killed. And in 2008, 2009, when Israel attacked Gaza, Shayma asked Rifat who created the Jews.
Mhm.
And this stirred an internal conversation that translated into Rifat asking his students who were traumatized by the 2008 2009 attack to write about their experiences under occupation as a means of healing.
Mhm.
So Rifat asked us to write stories, short stories, fiction. He believed that fiction is more powerful than nonfiction because nonfiction would live a day or two. If you read news or even an opinion article, becomes boring later. But fiction is global and it's
Mhm.
not time sensitive. You could read it 100 years later. So he wanted us to write fiction, but doesn't mean that he only encouraged us to write fiction.
Mm. It's interesting.
Because he encouraged a lot of his students also to write opinion articles and features and even news and to be active in social media.
Yeah.
Mhm.
But he wanted both. He believed in the power of fiction. And he collected, I believe, 23 stories written by 15 young writers uh, in Gaza. And the publisher, Helena Kuban, would always joke with Rifat, "What do you mean by young?" And he would say, "A young person is any person who's younger than me." uh, and so these are the stories of people who grew up under siege and occupation in Gaza. I wrote a short story. This is the only short story I wrote in my life. That's because Rafat pushed me to write a short story that is based on a real story that happened in my life. I have two brothers named Omar. One was killed by Israel, and then my mother had another baby, and she named him after him.
Wow.
And again, the impact of Malcolm X and Rifat's teaching. So I chose the title Omar X for my story.
Mm.
Mm.
It's about my youngest brother who lived a life that he probably didn't want to live, being named after someone who was killed.
Mm.
Wow.
Now he's 19 years old. He was
Mhm.
evacuated from Gaza, and
Okay.
he goes to
I'm glad.
school. But to go back to Rifat, so he encouraged his students. You see all these names on in the book: Muhammad Sulaiman, Nur
Mhm.
Stusi, um,
And 70%
Rawan
women,
Yaghi.
right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So he always, I mean, this is normal because a lot of women go to school in Gaza. The
Yeah.
numbers are higher than men. And
Oh.
Rifat would always encourage women to, write and even help them with job applications and reference letters to pursue their higher education,
Mhm.
both men and women, but especially women. And I remember in one of his talks about poetry, you can find it online. There is a series of talks he gave on
Yeah.
poetry. It's on his YouTube page. He talks about Fadwa Tukhan, and he starts by saying, "Please do not introduce her as the sister of Ibrahim Tukhan, because he's also a poet.
Mm-hmm.
Because she herself is very smart and popular."
Yeah.
Mm.
So that's Rafat. I know a countless number of his female students that he encouraged
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
to pursue their higher education, who he helped to get jobs
Mhm.
and advance in their lives. So he collected these stories
Mhm.
and he worked on them, he edited them, and he decided to publish them with Just Word Books in the United States. And we went on a speaking tour. We went to 10 different US cities, seven
Yeah.
states. I remember we were in New York, New Jersey, Philadelphia, Washington, D.C., Washington. I have a lot of stories. I can go on for more than 45 minutes.
Yeah, I was.
Traveling with Rifat to San Francisco, California. Um, I'm trying to remember the other states and cities we went to.
Mhm.
We've been all over the US, from the West Coast to the East Coast. We met a lot of people, Georgia, Atlanta. Um, so we
Yeah.
were in the American South, and Rifat loved Yol. He would always use it. And if people use it, he would tell them, "You lost me at Yol."
Yeah.
He would
That's
joke
so
with
funny.
them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he had the greatest sense of humor. During the speaking tour, we met a lot of people. You see, 10 years ago, even people who participated in sit-ins and protests, they actually met Rifat, especially in the US.
Mm.
A lot of people who we met on this speaking tour wrote to me, and they said, we did this vigil in memory of Rifat. We did this sit-in because we really met thousands of people. I would say
Yeah.
a couple of thousand, like really hundreds of people
Yeah.
during these engagements. We spoke at different places, churches,
Hmm.
community centers, mosques,
Hmm.
universities.
I mean,
So
part of what you're saying makes me think of what a different moment we're in now, in some way. You know, like this would be impossible. The last 2 years has been excruciating, and of course, education, universities, schools have become these battlegrounds. I don't know how one can combat this extreme fight against education, against universities, the fact that universities are so complicit in promoting the genocide, in taking the side of Israel. And I don't know, what do you feel? How do you survey this situation? It's so confounding and so upsetting. Every day something horrible, you know.
it's tragic that this change, because if you, as you said, 10 years ago, we were in totally different position.
Hmm.
And every year you go back to the US and you speak to people, you see this change taking place. And sometimes you feel it's too slow. And in Light in Gaza, Rifat wrote a chapter about this, that this change has been very slow. And he felt frustrated that um, it took so long for people to start to change.
Hmm.
Um, and then he asked the question, will it pass? Or shall it pass? This is what we say in Arabic, that don't worry, everything will be all right, you know. But at some point, he felt that it took so long. And I wish if Rifat lived long enough to see this change, like all these student encampments
Yeah.
named after him, all these libraries.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, a lot of people, like revolutionaries and leaders like Rifat, they do not live long enough to see this change happening.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, but I don't think that Rifat ever lost hope that this change will happen.
Hmm.
As I said, the price, the cost was too high. It was, you know, the lives of Palestinians, it was the life of Rifat that we had to pay. And I mean, if we watch the news in the US and elsewhere in the world, it's very depressing what's happening to students and the
Hmm.
Mm.
crackdown on the student movement. But this is, I mean, not new. If you look at the past, in the 60s, it was always students during the Vietnam War who led protests and social and political change. Change might be very slow. This is unfortunate, but it's happening. Not just in relation to Palestine, in relation to many other issues.
Hmm.
Sometimes the crackdown gets, ugly, but probably that's the moment that will flip the coin and change the perception of people that we thought will never change. Really,
Yeah.
I know people that I thought that will never change that changed.
Yeah.
Hardcore, like people on the other side of the political spectrum. You see people
Right.
changing because what's happening in Gaza today is just horrible. They cannot justify it in any way.
I know.
So again, it's we have to look at both sides. That is a massacre happening, a genocide, but at the same time, there are people changing, and we're getting there. There is a crackdown. Um, but
Yeah.
this we have also to think that, I mean, student encampments led to change on campus. A lot of people,
Hmm.
especially in elite universities.
So you do feel that this moment is different. Sometimes I think this moment is extraordinary. And then when you think about the history of Palestine and the long durée of genocidal logic, ethnic cleansing, massacres, violence, then I think is this even different, or do I just know more? But you seem to be saying that we are in some sort of an extreme explosion, right?
To be honest with you, I wouldn't call it like extreme explosion, but at the same time, not me, not you, not anybody in the world, it knows exactly when this change will actually materialize, and
Sure.
we see, like people gaining their freedom. For example, they see the siege of Gaza is coming to an end, and that people who committed war crimes are brought to justice. We never know because it feels so depressing. Like when it happens, the moment
Yeah.
itself, like you live it, you feel like you're hopeless. It's not going to happen. This is not enough. But when it happens, we don't know exactly when. But I do believe that what happened in Gaza will accelerate this process of change for sure.
Hmm.
And only when it happens that we will realize that this is the moment for change. And then we will look back
Right.
in time at history and say we did the right thing.
Hmm.
The most important thing is that we're doing the right thing in the moment, that we refuse this
Hmm.
to be in our names.
Yeah.
As students, we'll be on campus. As lawyers, we will advocate for people who get arrested. As teachers, etc., educators, doctors, we go to Gaza and help.
Yeah.
Hmm.
But we will not be silent. In the moment, we will do our part, and
Yeah.
change will come. Maybe we'll see this change. We will live to see it. Maybe not. But the most important thing is to be ethical and to do your part. At the same time, when you see people changing, I'm sure if you look at your own circles, like
Hmm.
your friends, your family,
Right.
what happened in Gaza was a turning point in history in many different ways.
Hmm.
And we will see this change in the short run, in the long run, in the middle run, in the long run.
Hmm.
But
Yeah.
again, the price, when you have family there, it's too heavy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You have to function outside Gaza as a normal, even when you live in Gaza itself. Like Rifat cared for 50 people in his
Mm.
family. He had to bring water and food to them every day. And just
Hmm.
before he was killed, he told his friend Asim al Nabi that he felt tired of doing this every day. So you have to act as if nothing is happening when everything is happening. When you have bombardment all over the place,
Yeah.
um, you lose your home, you lose your family, you lose your friends, you do not have access to water, electricity. Life is not fair at all. Like you're not treated as a human being, but at the same time, you're expected to be okay and steadfast and
Mhm.
not leave
Hmm.
your land. And to tell the story. This is what Rifat did. Imagine, like under these circumstances, he would walk thousands of steps every day.
Hmm.
Mm.
I was told he walked 20,000 steps every day to get access to the internet. So Rifat appearing on social media, at some point it was not as active, wasn't that easy.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
having access to the internet would have cost him his life. Many
Yeah.
Absolutely.
people were killed trying to get signal, access to call their families or to have access to the internet. But still, Rifat still did
Yeah.
it, and this tells how much he believed in the power of storytelling and
Right.
narrative, and
Yeah.
the need to even document this
Hmm.
moment in history that is very important.
Yusuf, I think one of the most enduring things about Rafat's work is that it gave, continues to provide a sense of hope in a situation that can feel so utterly hopeless, and that is so liberating for everyone that continues to agitate in whatever way, shape, and form against the state and against this violent genocide. Um, so I just wanted to ask you, what are your plans? What does the future hold for you? In your work.
So currently, I work as the Gaza coordinator at the American Friends Service Committee.
Mhm.
I continue to write, translate,
Hmm.
um, edit books, and tell more stories of people. This is my plan. This is my um, long-term plan, I would say, in life, is to tell the stories of people in Gaza and Palestine. Hopefully, this will bring about change eventually. Um, and again, anything I do now goes back to Rifat. I'm forever grateful for his wisdom, guidance, and mentorship.
Yeah.
And like I wouldn't become a writer without Rifat.
Hmm.
And he planted the seeds of writing in thousands of his students. So
Yeah.
he created an army of writers. He
Yeah.
taught us a novel called An Army of Roses, I believe.
Hmm.
And he created an army of writers who write out of Gaza or about Gaza. So this is my project in life. I will continue to do that. I will continue to talk about Rafat
Yeah.
himself. I feel like a great responsibility to tell his story. This is what he wanted in his poem,
Mhm.
Yeah.
so that he becomes a tale. And this tale, his killing doesn't go in vain. That it,
Hmm.
it turns into a tale that is told by people, that brings about change, that
Hmm.
brings freedom to his people. This is what
Mhm.
Arafat wanted, and I think he got what he wanted. He was killed, assassinated, taken from us so early in life. He was only 44, but
Hmm.
I think this is the most honorable way to die, and the legacy he created. That people are still remembering him every day.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's just unbelievable. So I think this is the best way, to tell these stories.
Yeah.
I think if I tell these stories and continue to write more, I will just stay honest to Rifat's will.
Just listening to you, I'm just so, I mean, I don't have any more words left because just listening to you feels, it feels heavy, but it also feels hopeful. But I do want to finish with the thing saying that, from the moment, say, I saw all of you speak a decade ago to the moment now when we teach Gaza Writes Back, when we talk about Rafat, what I really see is a generation of young people who have changed, who not only believe in the liberation of Palestine, but the liberation of all people. And I think you and Rafat and so many people have an incredible role to play in it. And again, I just want to say that please keep editing, keep writing. It's great to see. And I think there's a beautiful line that Bhakti keeps mentioning from the introduction is like, Rafat did not die, he multiplied.
I want also to conclude with the story Rifat told about Malcolm X in his autobiography. He says, early in life, I learned that if you want to get something, you have to make some noise. And he speaks of his experience getting a cheese sandwich from his mom. So he made noise and he would always get the sandwich. His other siblings were very quiet. They never got the sandwich. And I think writing and editing is just the noise that we need to make today
Amazing.
Yeah.
to get the cheese.
Yeah.
That is liberation and freedom.
I love
Mm.
it. Thank
Yeah.
you so
Thank
much.
you.
Thank
Wonderful.
you.